There we
There
are.
I am. Hi, all. Thank you so much, Lisa and to Powell, for having me today. Oh my goodness, you guys have such an amazing organization and resource at your fingertips here on the East Coast. We have nothing in Oregon. And so when I heard about this organization, I've just been so impressed. And I appreciate the opportunity today to meet with you all and to share my story to you parents and caregivers and mental health professionals. I know the road that you're on very well. And throughout my journey, I have felt lots of emotions, frustration and anger and hopelessness and helplessness and isolation and shame and all the things that you all have faced as well. So first today, I want to just thank you all, parents and mental health professionals, for your care and your support, your advocacy, for your compassion, your love for these children with youth mental illness. For without you, they would be lost. I'm going to share my screen here real quick. Sorry, I'm losing my mouse here. There we are. Technical difficulties, right? So my goal today is to provide you all some insight about what our family went through and what we've learned through our daughter throughout the years. However, I don't want to build false hope. As many of you know, mental illness, there's no way of fixing it or making your child normal. There's no recipe or secret sauce. Oftentimes when I meet with parents, they come into me and I think they expect that there's some recipe or methodology that I'm going to tell them that's going to make everything better. And it's just not the case. There's all sorts of gray in mental illness. And as I'm sure you know, it's a lifelong disability that must be continuously managed. A little housekeeping for this morning. We are going to do some audience participation a few times. You can use a cell phone if you're on your desktop or laptop. If you're using a cell phone to participate in this Zoom meeting, you're going to want to go to the chat. There will be a link on how to participate there that you can get to. I will give very specific instructions and walk you through it, so no worries, just giving you a heads up there. And I'm going to start today with an excerpt from my book, On the Edge, Health and Hope for Parenting Children with Mental Illness. And it's called Prisoners in Our Home. How had it come to this? We were prisoners in our own home. Our daughter, Chloe, routinely exploded with foul language, tantrums, and even threats and weapons. Her younger sister had become her minion and punching bag. Alienated from neighbors and peers, Chloe had no friends, and her days consisted of sleeping in until noon, eating, and playing video games until the wee hours of the morning. Disabled by anxiety and depression, unable to communicate or socialize with her classmates or to break down school assignments, she often refused to get out of bed for school, crying uncontrollably in a fetal position. "No, Mama, please don't make me go." She only attended about 30% of the time, and more often than not, I had to go with her for support. Our school district did little to provide resources and help. My husband and I felt demoralized and defeated, and we despaired about what Chloe's future might look like and might be. And here's Chloe on the right there. So she's 5, and Sophia, her little sister, is on the left, and she is 4. And, you know, this time just seems like it was yesterday for me. And I just remember during the kind of height of what we were going through with Chloe, the stress and the anxiety and gosh, the tension I feel constantly for having that burden really on my shoulders and constantly managing our day in and day out crisis. Like I can remember just the stress in my back, and it was almost, you know, in my head, I got migraines in my neck and all the things because of the constant stress and trauma. And it chipped away at my confidence and self-esteem. And I also remember not just feeling my pain, but feeling Chloe's and really internalizing it. From her anxiety and depression, from having no friends and being bullied, from not understanding school and her homework, feeling stupid, from people telling her she wasn't listening, she wasn't trying, she didn't care, and believing she was bad, worthless, and just a disappointment. I knew early on that she was struggling. I myself suffer from depression and anxiety, and I could just feel it in my core. It wasn't until I met with her first grade teacher in a conference, and she said that during class time and instruction that Chloe was like spacing off, and she wasn't connecting and processing the information. And it wasn't until she did one-on-one instruction with her that she saw that she was actually processing and learning and taking it in. I remember feeling so validated by hearing that, because it was like I felt it in my gut, and everybody was like so dismissive about it. But I was also terrified, right? And sad that for all the struggles that I knew she was going to be facing. It was a long beginning of a long journey of continued shame and stigma, misdiagnoses, helplessness, despair, anger, frustration, all the things I'm sure you all can relate to. Chloe just turned 20 a few weeks ago, and she's in good shape. She lives at home, and she works actually for a nonprofit organization that works with disabled people, and it's on a farm. She loves horses and all the farm animals and all the things. So she's doing great. She's got a neurological disorder called nonverbal learning disorder, ADHD, anxiety, and depression. Now, I'm not sure if you know Brene Brown. I'm sure a lot of you do, a lot of the mental health professionals. If you don't, you need to check her out. I encourage you. She's an accomplished doctor of psychology, award-winning author, TED Talk speaker. She's a consultant and really an all-around badass. And I'm reading her book right now called Braving the Wilderness. And it really spoke to me while I was preparing for this presentation. The book talks about how we can really love ourselves and belong, and true belonging. And Brene says, being ourselves means sometimes having to find the courage to stand alone. Being ourselves means sometimes having to find the courage to stand alone. And geez, does that sound familiar? Standing alone. I mean, that was the isolation and feeling like there was no one else who got what I was going through was the predominant sort of feeling that I had. And, you know, still have to a point going through our whole process and journey with Chloe. And when I talk to parents, it's the number one thing that they say too, there's no support. And, you know, it's that feeling that no one really gets it. They don't know what to ask you. They don't know what to say, or they don't say or ask you anything at all because of the fear of, you know, what's going to come out, and that they don't know how to deal with it or how to respond. So I want to know this morning how you guys are doing. I want to give you the opportunity and ask you how you're doing and how it's going. We're going to be doing that participation right now. Again, if you have a cell phone that you're using to watch this Zoom meeting, we'll want to make sure that you go into the chat and you'll find a slido.com link that you're going to want to link onto, and it will pop up. If you have a cell phone that you can use on the side, you're going to go to your camera and open up that camera. If you put it on the QR code, you'll see at the top a little message pop up. You'll click on that. And if you want to use your browser, you can go to slido.com and you'll put in the code 463808. And hopefully you're seeing this question. Tell us how you're feeling. And you'll want to use one or two words. Just be brief. When you put in a word or submit it, you'll be able to add other words. And this is a word cloud. So we'll start to see these words populating. So hopeful, great, tired, overwhelmed, lots of hopeful, which is wonderful, and overwhelmed and tired, excited. And this is, it's awesome as I see this, because I love to take this information back and share it with other groups and parents I work with, and other presentations that I give. So thank you so much for participating and sharing how you're doing. I hope that with this, it's a little bit relieving and cathartic for those of you who are struggling. And I hope it shows that you are really not alone, that we're all part and belong to this wonderful community. And with PAL, you have a fabulous community as well. So thank you. This is fantastic. All right. So going on with our story, again, an excerpt from On the Edge, and I'm calling this a roller coaster of despair. Jeff and I started to notice that Chloe's behavior seemed to be different from other children when she was 3. When she was 4, we enrolled her in a local Montessori school, and the teacher told us that Chloe didn't follow directions. During circle time, she would pop up and act out and be random. And she never played with the other kids. She'd always, at recess, retreat to the corner of the playground where there was a little bunny, and she would talk and play with the bunny the whole time. And when she did try to interact with other kids, she didn't know how to get along with them, and she couldn't share. This followed her through the years. After a few months at preschool, she started to cry hysterically when I dropped her off. And the minute we drove up to the door, she just started bawling. I'd tear her out of the car, get her into the preschool. She was holding onto my leg as I was leaving. The teacher was having to peel her off, and I would leave literally, hysterical, and driving to work, just wondering what are we doing wrong? So she was there for a few months at a winter break. My husband, Jeff, and I really felt it was traumatizing to her. And we didn't know what was going on. So we ended up pulling her out. And even though we knew this was the right decision in our gut, society was telling us that we had failed as parents, or we felt that way, because we had given in to our 4-year-old daughter. As she got older, Chloe's tantrums continued to intensify, and we didn't understand her needs or how to parent her. Our upbringing of that, kind of old school parenting wasn't working. It was making things worse for her, and we were always on the brink of crisis and helplessness. When Chloe was 6, she was referred to a psychiatrist who was diagnosed her with bipolar disorder and ADHD. He prescribed medication to stabilize her moods, and while it helped on and off, her moods continued to be a roller coaster. After a few years, we switched doctors, and the roller coaster of different medications and Chloe's rages continued. Desperate, we eventually took Chloe up to Portland, which is about 5 hours north of Southern Oregon, where we are, for a 3rd and 4th opinion by yet another psychiatrist and psychologist. Discouraging to us, the psychologist determined that there was nothing wrong with Chloe and that we were making up the issues. But the psychiatrist diagnosed Chloe with Asperger's. And while she said she'd recommend certain treatments, when we took it back to our doctor here in Southern Oregon, she disagreed. She said, "Oh no, Chloe definitely has bipolar." And although that didn't feel right to my husband and I in our gut, how could we argue with the doctor, right? We felt defeated and frustrated, and didn't learn until much later that Asperger's is often misdiagnosed in girls especially, and has comorbid disorders. So nonverbal learning disorder, for some people, consider that on the autism spectrum. And there's a lot of similarities to Asperger's, but it's not identical. Here's Chloe about the time that we got her diagnosed, or got her 3rd and 4th diagnoses up in Portland. This was the only time that she's received a Student of the Month award in her school career. Her little sister, on the other hand, was receiving it pretty much on a monthly basis, and Chloe is the only time in her career that she got it. So at this point, my mental health was in crisis, and I had stopped working full time. I started a small consulting company, marketing consulting company, and I worked really minimal hours so that I could attend to Chloe's needs and school struggles. I was hyper anxious, hyper agitated, super depressed, and I began to internalize and take the burden on of what my family was going through, Chloe's, depression and anxiety, the trauma my daughter was going through, the shame and stigma that we are facing throughout. And I felt like our public school district really wasn't helpful at all. They gave her minimal supports and accommodations. And even though she was diagnosed by a psychiatrist and placed on an IEP, we felt so desperate. I started to research a little digger, see if there were some local resources. And I actually found a day treatment center near our home, which had small class sizes. It was run by a mental health agency. And so it had, mental health supports and counseling. And after we contacted the director, his first question to me was, "Oh, is Chloe on Medicaid?" And I said, "No, we're privately insured." And he said, "Oh, well, your school won't refer her then if she's not on Medicaid. We only accept Medicaid children." And we were so desperate. I said, "You know what? We'll find $4,000 a month and pay you for this school. Like, we need help. We don't know what to do." And he agreed, but he called back a day or two later saying that they were unable to accept Chloe due to a conflict of interest with our public school. And as many of you probably know, the school district had a large annual contract with this mental health agency, which only served and they only referred Medicaid students. So if we paid a privately insured, we paid the mental health agency directly, our school district, public school district, would be in violation of Oregon state law, which mandates that they provide those educational accommodations. Our school district even initially refused to pay for Chloe's homebound tutor, and we finally got him to 2 days a week. The other day she wasn't going. And during an accommodation meeting, the administrator said, to qualify for a homebound tutor, your child has to have a physical disability. And my husband quickly quipped, "Last time I checked, the brain is physically connected to the human body." All of these experiences are laced with shame, which is often unspoken and invisible. I know you all know shame. And I know you know that it's not just one time or one incident, it's years and years. For us, the shame was years and years being told that we weren't parenting Chloe right, even though we had that other daughter who tomorrow is graduating with honors and was a gifted athlete. The shame was not getting invited to parties or not going at all to avoid a blow up or embarrassment. The shame was doctors telling us to give up hope on the possibility that Chloe might ever lead a happy, productive life. The shame was having appropriate accommodations for education withheld, even though progress was not being made quarter after quarter, year after year, leaving us to feel like they wanted Chloe to fail. They wanted us to fail as parents. The shame was being denied payment by our insurance carriers for the intensive treatment that saved our daughter's life, saved our lives, ultimately costing us and our family $300,000 out of pocket. The shame was being asked, will she ever grow out of it? Will she have to take medication forever? Will she be fixed when she comes back for treatment? Or hearing, oh, my kids throw fits too. Everyone has problems with their kids. Or I'd never stand for that type of behavior in my home. While what they didn't see in our home was we are in constant crisis day in, day out. They didn't see Chloe abusing her sister or abusing me, knocking holes in walls, destroying our home from one end to the other, breaking TV, throwing objects, or pulling knives on families and neighbors. So let's dig into shame a little bit more, shall we? I truly believe that shame is the reason it's so hard for us to advocate for our kids and ourselves. It makes you feel bare and like you don't belong anywhere. It magnifies that sense of isolation that we were talking about earlier. Again, going back to Brene Brown, she has spent a better part of her career studying shame and connection and courage. And this is what she has to say about shame. Shame is the warm feeling that washes over us, making us feel small, flawed, and never good enough. When we experience shame, we feel disconnected and desperate for worthiness. Does that resonate? So we're going to do audience participation again. Think about your shame triggers when it comes to, mental health, the profession you do in mental health, your child's mental health. And let us know how you're feeling. Again, if you have a cell phone that you're using to watch the Zoom, you're going to want to go into that chat and click the link there. You can use your cell phone if you have one, the camera. If you open it and put it on that QR code, it should pop up for you, the browser, or you can go to slido.com and type in the number 463-808. And here we go. What are our shame triggers? Again, put in like one word at a time and enter it, and then you'll be able to submit other answers as well. So we'll see these starting to populate. Blame, dismissal, letting people down, depression. I mean, for me, it was really about being a bad mom, not being smart enough, not being able to save my daughter. Guilt is a good one. Blame is a huge one. That shame and stigma. So one of the things I wanted to share about shame that I have learned throughout the years, a very important tool, is that the more you acknowledge and speak about shame and to your shame, the less power it has over you. It's super hard and scary at first. And I remember when I started my blog, it's been about 7 years. And the first time that I posted my first article, it was right after Chloe went to treatment for the first time. And I was literally, so I posted it to Facebook, right? And I was like literally shaking as I posted it. And then afterwards, I'm like, oh my God, what did I do, right? Like I just posted, everybody's gonna think, I'm crazy and I'm weird. We've got this family, we have all these issues. My husband was gonna be mad at me because he didn't know about it, that I did this post. But guess what happened? People came out of the woodwork and were like, Andrea, thank you so much for sharing this. No one talks about mental illness. No one talks about the shame and the stigma and really what's going on. And people from all over the country that I had connections with were saying, I have a daughter who also has this, or a cousin, or my sister's, son is going through the same thing. And I believe that leaning into that shame helps you learn more about yourself and your happiness. It goes back to Brene Brown's Braving the Wilderness, which is a book that I'm reading of hers. We often have to brave it on our own and listen to our gut in order to find the best answer for ourselves and our family. Nice, these are great. Thank you so much for sharing. Again, I hope that you're seeing with this how much you really belong to this group and that you're not alone in this process. So I'm going to go to a blog excerpt from the lemonadeproject.com is where my blog resides, and it's called Treatment Round 1 and 2. At the end of Chloe's 6th grade year, I shared my story with a colleague, and she told me about an alternative charter school that her grandson went to. I immediately called the school and got Chloe on the list for her 7th grade year. Though she was super reluctant and anxious about starting it, I was so relieved. Like, the staff was awesome. A lot of the other kids had challenges and trauma and were on the spectrum. And they worked with her to maximize her learning capabilities. For the first time ever, Chloe actually liked school. It was a huge accomplishment accomplishment and relief for my husband and I. She was still guarded with other children, but by the end of her 7th grade year, she did start inviting kids over to play. However, her new school wasn't enough to change her warped perception she had developed and the dysfunctional behaviors that she was using to survive over the years. She was still skipping school about half the time, and she was still ruling our household. After visiting a residential treatment center 4 hours north of our home, Jeff and I decided to send Chloe to treatment when she was just 13, just after her 13th birthday. It was one of the most horrible and difficult decisions we had ever made. They finally had a bed open. I called, I remember daily, this treatment facility. Do you have a bed open? Do you have a bed open? And it took almost a month for us to wait to have a bed open. And it was the same weekend that Chloe and I were actually supposed to drive down to watch my nephew, her cousin, graduate from high school in California, Napa Valley area. So we used the California trip as a ruse, and my mom came along for the ride, and we headed up north instead to Corvallis, Oregon, to the treatment facility. Chloe's doctor had prescribed a sedative in the morning to help her sleep that we added into her morning medication. And as we neared the treatment center, I just remember my heart, dropping into my stomach and feeling sick. She woke up, but she didn't notice at first. She's, coloring, happy as a clam, and watching movies to pass the time. But when we got closer, she started to comprehend what was happening. I felt so awful, so guilty. I had totally betrayed her. I was the one person she trusted and relied upon, and I was locking her up with strangers. I was glad to have my mom, who drove us home because I was a blithering mess. About a month later, we transferred Chloe to another treatment facility that was closer to home. We felt like she wasn't making as much progress in the first one, and she did really well at that one. So about 6 weeks later, they felt like she was ready to come home, and it was just in time to start her 8th grade year. Her first year after treatment, or during 8th grade, was awesome. She was super successful. She, attended school almost 100% of the time. She did her homework. She had a schedule. She did chores. She took responsibility for herself. She got along with her sister a lot better. And her teachers even remarked what a change they saw in Chloe. When 9th grade came along, Chloe still made a lot of strides academically and was doing well, but she began to socialize with friends that were neither stable or healthy. By January of her freshman year, Chloe had been set up for a fight by a friend, which rocked her trust and knocked her off her path. By the end of January, she had dropped out of school and was practicing risky behaviors. Feeling defeated and hopeless after that fight, Chloe wrote this post on her social media. "I'm always put down, and I am never, ever happy with myself. I always find a way to F something important up, and I don't know how to stop it. I just want to have a nice life, but I can't because I'm mentally challenged. I didn't even ask to be mentally challenged. I was born with it. I'm literally so close to ending my life, you don't understand. Yeah, I look happy on the outside, but on the inside, I'm a disaster and a disappointment." After the second time, a few months later, of Chloe getting jumped and beat up, Jeff and I realized we needed to intervene again. Our therapist, of course, supported and urged us, saying that we had a probable future of drug addiction, legal problems, or worse, suicide or death if we didn't intervene. This time, we hired a third-party agency to help us find the right treatment facility for Chloe, which ended up being a therapeutic boarding school in Utah that had horses and an equine therapy program. Getting her there was literally a nightmare. We knew she wasn't going to go voluntarily, so we hired a third-party transport company, and they sent 2 intervention specialists at 3 a.m. in the middle of the night to take Chloe to the Utah program. I remember it so vividly. We gave the intervention specialist a backpack just full, of a change of clothes. That's it. She didn't get her phone, music, nothing. And we went downstairs to introduce her to these two people, these two strangers. My hands and knees were just like trembling and shaky, and my heart felt like it was beating out of my chest. I turned on the light and we introduced her. And Chloe said, "Mom, I don't want to go." And I said, "I know." And one of the specialists said, "Say your goodbyes. You and Jeff need to leave," my husband. And we did. Ended up going to his parents' house, sitting on their bed. They were out of town, and just holding each other and crying. The first year in her school in Utah was really a struggle. We were not with a therapist that was a good match for us, but we knew in our gut that it was the right place. So after a lot of advocacy with the program director, we were able to switch therapists to one that was really a great fit for our family and for Chloe. And the minute she got with that therapist, Kim, she just bloomed. She was like, a little butterfly coming out of her cocoon. And she thrived. She loved the program. And she ended up graduating in December 2018. This picture is of Chloe at age 15. This was right before we sent her to treatment. You can see her body language and her face. And then this one is right after she graduated from high school. That's my family. My husband, Jeff, and you can tell who his parents are, they're tall, and then who my parents are, they're short. And then my other daughter, Sophia, is right to the right of me, and then my sister, Christina. I feel so grateful for the opportunity to have Chloe go to treatment and to have the amount of therapy and counseling we had and tools, and to understand what was going on with her brain, and how to manage it and how to work with her day in and day out. And it has become my mission and my purpose in life to help other parents and to pass that gift of information onto other people. So I want to share that with you today. When I started preparing for this presentation, I asked some of my parent friends who were at treatment with us, who had a daughter also at treatment, what advice would they give 5 years ago? Knowing what you know now, what would you say to parents at this presentation, at this conference? And here were the few themes. Listen to your gut and your intuition. If you feel like something is off, get your child evaluated. If it doesn't feel right, it's probably not. Be brave, go outside your comfort zone. Think outside the box. Ask teachers and other people, adults that you trust, what they see in your child. Don't get stuck on a diagnosis just to check the box, right? Diagnoses are not black and white. They're a spectrum and can look different on different kids. Your kid needs to connect with the professional they're working with. If they're not, switch to someone else. You can waste a lot of time not getting anywhere. You'll know when your child is making progress. Again, you will know when your child is making progress. And as one of my friends says, while there's some hope and help, you'll never fix your child or make them normal. It's all about managing their shortcomings and constantly accepting them for who they are. Manage your expectations. Don't set yourself up or your child up for failures. Take small steps. And then these next ones I like to call the $300,000 takeaways. So again, it's sharing some of the information that we were able to get in treatment. I want to be able to pass these gifts along to you, and what we learned. And some of the primary factors were: don't compromise family values. Use those family values as a compass. Use empathy and the collaborative, proactive solutions to communicate. Lead with questions. And I believe there's someone doing the CPS model today, talking to it. If you're not in that session, I highly encourage you to check it out if you haven't yet. Dr. Ross Green, Greene, is the doctor, and it's lives in the balance. And it is game changing. It was game changing for us, and they used it at our treatment center. Keep communication open, maintain your boundaries, and stay the course and consistent, right? Like just with the rest of life, with exercise or dieting or your relationships or whatever it may be, it's all about staying the course and maintaining consistency. The other thing the treatment program gave us early on is they had this like little laminated card. And on there it said blessed. And this is what the letters stood for: boundaries, let go. So meaning let go of things you can't control, let go of things with your child sometimes, empathetic listening, sit with emotion. Again, let your child sit with the emotion. Don't try to fix everything. Encourage them and coach them to solve their own problems. Embrace growth opportunities, cheerlead them on, and be very deliberate in word and deed. As many of you know, kids who suffer with emotional challenges and have a lot of sensory issues, we need to keep it simple, right? Keep it simple, stupid. Use the KISS method and only saying a few words and being really deliberate about what you're saying in your message. And then Andrea's takeaways from our past 20 years. Give yourself permission to be angry, scared, discouraged, proud, confused, tired, fed up, trapped, happy, delighted, joyful, and proud. Forgive yourself for not knowing the answers, for not being able to take their pain away, for making wrong decisions, for being angry and not understanding. Don't feel guilty for setting boundaries and taking care of yourself. Give yourself grace. All of you need to know that you are crushing it. Find your tribe, even though it may only be one or two people that you can lean on them. So find your tribe and lean on them. The other, let go of the other people who are never going to get it. And I mean, in a sense of let go that they're not going to get it. Not, you know, there still can be friends and you can still have loved ones in your family and all the things, but there are going to be some people who just don't get it. Know that your child is hearing and absorbing more than you think they are and they believe you are. That you believe they are. One of the things that has been interesting to me as Chloe has been home the last couple of years, she had one job for a year and now she's on her second job, is that I'm so impressed with how kind she is, how loyal, you know, how caring she is, how honest. And it's, you know, one of those things that we didn't see at all before because she wasn't being true to herself, right? Like she was filled with so much of this trauma and hate and confusion that until she got rid of all that, we weren't able to see it. Try to let go of your shit and negativity, right? You have enough of it and your kid has enough of it as well. And then find gratitude in everyday life. This is something that I didn't do before Chloe went off to her boarding school. And they did it every night before they went to bed. They would say 3 things that they were grateful for. And so when she came home to visit, we would do the 3 things she was grateful, or that we were all grateful for. And then I've just adopted it as a way of life too. And it really frames your perspective and sets your intention for the day. My kind of go-tos, if I forget to do them or it's, you know, halfway through the day, my go-tos in the morning are have grace with yourself and other people, have patience with yourself and other people, and find gratitude in everyday life. Even if that's a flower, a kitty or a dog you have, some soft socks, whatever it is, there is always something to be grateful for. And it helps so much to frame your perspective for the day. So I want to end today with doing one more word cloud and help you set your perspective for the day to find out what you're grateful for. And again, if you have that cell phone you're using for Zoom, you'll need to go into the chat. You can use your camera with a QR code or go into your browser at slido.com. number is 463-808. And let me know what you're grateful for. Let's pop that up. For me, my gratitude today is really to Pal and to Lisa to inviting me to speak with all of you and to share my story. I feel a lot of gratitude and joy in what I do with meeting with parents and working with other people who are struggling, because I know how miserable and what a bitch it was. And it's not, over. We're still managing all the things that have to go on day in and day out, and continually reminding ourselves. I hope today you were able to take some negative information away that will be able to give you focus or a sense of relief. And I want to thank you for all the work that you do with your children as mental health care professionals. And know that you belong to this tribe, right, that are here today on this conference. You've got a great day set up. I'm super excited for you all. So I've got a workshop or a workbook that's coming out. It's a companion guide to On the Edge in the fall. And you can see what we're doing at thelemonadeproject.com. And you can reach me personally at Andrea@spotlightmkg.com. And I feel like I'm just about to lose my voice, so this is good. So that is it. Thank you so much for having me. And I will unshare.
And thank you, Andrea, sorry, I'm saying that wrong. Andrea.
Right.
I'm so mesmerized by your talk. There was so much good stuff. I don't even know how to highlight what, really touched me and touched everybody. But I will say, when you talk about your tribe, it reminds me of a parent I knew years ago, and she had a child who was doing really well until she hit her teenage years. And then suddenly here was her child self-harming, running away. And it was as if she didn't know that child. And she said to me, I feel like I've suddenly joined a club and I don't know any of the other members. And so her goal was to try to find that tribe. And it just brought back that to me. So we have a few questions in the chat, and we may have a few more than I have right here. But one of the first ones that came up is, how do you get professionals who aren't listening to you to listen to you? Do you have any strategies for that?
I think that goes back to, and this may have come earlier on, but I think this goes back to finding the right fit for your family and for your child. And if your child or you're not connecting with that professional, to try to switch. I mean, again, it goes back to really digging in, listening to your gut and your intuition, and advocating. I mean, I can't tell you how many times people, and you've seen it all too. And it's so hard when you're going through crisis and you're exhausted. The last thing you have the energy to do is to fight for your right to have the right professional. But it is so important, because it is such a key in their treatment, their recovery, your learning, their learning, all the things. And when we were in treatment, it was our first therapist. He was awful. I mean, I don't mean to be mean, but he was. And it was just like I was fighting tooth and nail every single day to switch therapists, and calling the program director and emailing her, and it's exhausting, right? But it's kind of too that what is it, squeaky wheel gets the grease. Mm-hmm. You've got to advocate for your child. It's hard.
It absolutely is. So one of the other questions was, how did you personally deal with the shame?
Well, I think, I've been dealing with it because I have my own anxiety and depression for years and years. But I think, as I've gotten older, I've been able to understand and cope with it. Mm-hmm. When I went through our treatment process, and as Chloe was getting older, I was like so pissed off about so much stigma and shame systemically, that's why I started to come out and face it and tell others about it, because it was like, this is, BS. Like, we're having to face all this stuff that really, it's just unjust, right? And so for me, it was really about sharing it with people. And again, not everybody accepts it and welcomes it. And you sort of have to find those people who do and who will listen and who are cheerleaders beside you. So for me, was really about speaking out, and it has not been easy. I mean, when, I first released the book On the Edge, and I'd get interview calls, it was like, I had bile come up in my mouth every single time, like I was going to throw up, because it was like so nerve-wracking for me. And again, I'd just be like shaking, and I've gotten more used to it, obviously. But so I always say, lean into your shame and talk about it. It does not have as much power over you if you lean into it and talk about it. And it's hard. And you've got to be able to kind of let go of people who dismiss you or say things back, and be angry about it, for a day, and then let it go, move on, go to someone else who understands. I go through a lot of, I'll just give another example. I'm working with a program called Champions of Change, and I actually came up with it, and working with a nonprofit in Southern Oregon. And we work with kids to basically say, Oregon suicide rate is so high. Teen suicide in Oregon is the leading cause of death. What's going on? Like, asking the kids, right? Instead of us being like, what's going on? Let's ask the kids to give us solutions and all the things. I mean, I'm trying to go into schools with this. You would think that I'm, coming in and talking about porn or something. Like, they are so, this stigma and shame that is there is so frustrating for me. It's like, you've got kids dying in your schools. Let's talk about what solutions are. So for me, I'm very, kind of on it and push and just face it. And it has really helped.
That's great. So I would like to read a comment. So from Karen, she said, I feel more validated by the last 30 minutes than this entire past year with the support systems in the public school. So you are really connecting and resonating with a lot of people who are here.
Well, and you know what? I so appreciate that feedback. Makes me teary, because you don't always know, and you don't always hear that. And I often feel like I'm an island out there on my own pushing for this. And I think probably a lot of you parents feel the same way, and mental health professionals. And there's so many people that don't get it, and they're scared to talk about it. And, they don't want to be seen as crazy or all the things, whatever it is, for all their own shame reasons, their own shame triggers, right, that we have in society. So I so seriously, so appreciate the feedback, because it fuels me. And it keeps me going, and my parents fuel me, and it keeps me going, because, it's so important to keep talking about this, because it's not going to change without all of us piecing together and talking about the same message.
Exactly. And another comment before I go to another question, Marilyn says, thank you for addressing the shame. It happens in so many instances when parents and guardians put their heart and soul into each step of each interaction. So that was her comment. So someone else asked, how do you get other people, not parents, to understand the trauma that parents feel when there's a separation, like when your child goes away to treatment or to a hospital, or is not in your home?
There is a lot of trauma with that, a ton. It's awful. I was depressed for the first year Chloe was in Utah because of the guilt and shame for that. But again, I think that you've got to find your tribe and your people who get it and lean on them. And there might only be one or two people, but lean on them over and over again. You're not going to change other people. I think the best way is to let people know. And if they open up to it and ask more questions, share with them, right? But if people sort of are dismissive, or you can tell, right? You get that feeling that they're sort of like, oh, no thanks, I don't want to talk about it, or whatever it may be. But you're not going to change. I think, people's feelings right away. And you're not going to be able to explain what you're going through. I mean, you just can't. I met with a mom yesterday morning, and she said, we like have a family that never, I mean, we've been so close. I would have never thought that something was going to happen in our family, mental illness. If you had asked me 5 years ago, if, I thought James was going to be going through this manic break or whatever he's going through, I would have been like, oh no, we don't have that in our family. And like, I wouldn't even known how to relate to it. She said, now she's like, I'm just desperate to find people. And so that's the difference, I think. And you can't, like, have empathy for something sometimes that you haven't gone through. And some people are more empathic than others, obviously.
That's a good point.
So they can feel it for you, but yeah, let go of that stuff. I mean, that's what I say. Have them as kind of superficial friends, and that's okay. Or, parents or family members, whatever it may be, and keep talking about it. I'm not saying don't, because I think it's important to educate and not silence yourself, but don't set yourself up for failure, right? With false expectations. Always manage. To me, happiness is about managing expectations in life.
Exactly. So a couple more comments. So Nicole said, thank you so much for sharing your story. Many of us know the shame well, and it's always nice to hear it validated. And Tara says, this is my story. We are still struggling for a correct diagnosis and supports. My daughter is now 20. So what would you suggest there if you just can't get clarity?
Keep going. I mean, that really is my suggestion. Is it's like I just, it's like, for me, again, because I'm super empathic and I have my own, mental health stuff going on. But it's like, I just knew through those 15 years before Chloe went to treatment, like, we're not getting it right. Like, I can tell from her and all the things, right? And so it just was switching from one provider to the next, and continue to do research, continue to talk to people. That's something I share with Chloe's diagnosis. It's like super misunderstood and missed. It's kind of newer, I think, and being on the autism spectrum, a lot of professionals don't know about it. And we're in such a small area in Southern Oregon, they were clueless. So that psychiatrist up in Portland, right? So we self-referred, like, we're just like, we're going to the psychologist and that psychiatrist, and the psychologist was like, y'all are making up your stuff, you're crazy. The psychiatrist was like, she's got Asperger's, and she actually gave me the book. I think it's like Parenting Children with Asperger's and Nonverbal Learning Disorder. But it was so foreign to me. And then when I went back down to the doctor, we went back down, and she's like, now she has bipolar. I knew still in my gut, and that's why we kept pushing forward, because your child too will respond. Your child will tell you. That's the other kind of, I think, message is, sometimes, obviously some kids are nonverbal, or with Chloe, she wasn't able to articulate and process what was going on in her mind early on. But with those behaviors, she's trying to tell you something, right? Or the child is trying to tell you something. So try to understand that they're communicating. When they connect with someone, that's what will happen. And if it means that you have to travel 2 hours to find the right professional for you, that's what that means.
So we have one final question. We find here that a lot of parents are getting really fired up, and they're going to the media with their story, and which gives it visibility, which is a really good thing. So the question is, do you have any tips for that outside advocacy, not for your child, but in order to change systems?
Gosh, that's a good question. I think I think always leading with the stories and that emotion has been something that I have found really successful, right? Because all of your stories that you work with mentally ill children, or you're a caregiver for them, it's flippant traumatic, right? And when you start talking about, you know, my daughter is like beating me up and my other daughter up, and she's holding her prisoner during their playtimes, and, you know, she's throwing objects and, you know, shoes across the room and breaking the TV or whatever, pulling knives. It's pretty compelling that, you know, it's out there and that it's happening. And then I also think that it's so kind of lead with emotion and feeling. And that's one of the things that I've learned with doing interviews and also just presentations. And when I go in and do proposals for Champions of Change, is that you lead with your story, lead with that feeling, because it's hard to argue with, you know, my kid is beating me up and we don't know what to do. Do you have this every day in your house? Oh, you don't. Oh, okay. So, right. So that's the first thing. And then the other thing I would say is then utilize sort of research, right? Like for Oregon, I'm able to say to these school administrators, teen suicide is the leading cause of death in Oregon. It's not okay. We need to do something about it, right? So here's my story, and then here's where we are. We've got to find out, and whatever we're doing is not working. So we need to come together. I don't have the answer, right? We've got to come together to find it. We need to ask these kids what the answer is. Social media is a whole another gamut. I mean, it's beautiful in the fact that we have these Facebook Lives and you guys are able to, you know, we're able to connect and belong and all the things. But from the other side, it puts kids in a fishbowl as their brains are developing that, you know, creates these expectations that are just not realistic. So.
Well, thank you so much, Andrea. It was great. I was mesmerized by every word. And I know from the comments, which we will send to you, a lot of people were as well. Andrea has donated 4 of her books for a giveaway, and we have noted who are the 4 people, lucky recipients, who are going to receive a book, and that will be coming directly from her. So if your name is in the chat as one of the recipients, one of the winners, congrats to you. You'll enjoy reading it. I know I have. So thank you very, very much. We're really so appreciative, especially that you had to get up so early for this. That was
yeah,
yeah,
thanks for having me. And those winners, you'll get a little care package from the Lemonade Project. So I'm kind of excited to get that to you.